Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, 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 everybody. It's your Uncle Jim, and we're back tonight with Kidney Stories 2. We have a very, very special show tonight with a very, very special guest. Our friend Risa Simon is with us tonight. Risa is a motivational speaker, mentor, author, and patient advocate. She's also a preemptive transplant recipient and the founder and CEO of Simon Says Seminars, Inc., the Proactive Path, and the nonprofit Transplant First Academy. Please welcome one of the best advocates in these United States, Miss Risa Simon.
Oh,
hello, Risa, how are you?
I am great. You know, Jim, that was the most excitement I've had since this pandemic, to have this music. And thank you for that. I needed that.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. So we're gonna talk all about Risa Simon tonight. So I'm very excited.
Well, I'm very excited and grateful for the honor to be on your show. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about your employment history before you were diagnosed as a kidney patient.
Sure. Gosh, we're going back some years here, but I spent over about 25 years in the dental profession, and a good chunk of it was spent teaching at a dental school, University of Pacific School of Dentistry in San Francisco. It actually now has the dean's name, but that was a great experience for me. And as luck would have it, the assistant dean of the university actually kind of picked me out of the crowd, if you will, and said, "Hey, I'm starting a firm, a practice management firm for dentists for their practices, and I'd like you to join my firm." And he put me in charge of clinical efficiency. When I was teaching at the school, I was teaching time and motion efficiency and really getting into dental auxiliary utilization for hand dentistry. And he wanted me to bring those principles into the practices. So that was an extraordinary blessing that I was able to join forces with this firm. And it was honestly an incredible blessing for someone who started their career in dentistry as a chairside assistant. So typically I was changing bibs and aspirating saliva and mixing cements. So that was really thrilling. And that's when my speaking and consulting career kicked off. And I was with the Pride Institute for a little over 3 years. They became very corporate. And I found from input and feedback from our clients that they were wanting to do some things that were a little different and outside the box. So I spread my wings and set up my own company called Teamwork Concepts at that time, which eventually turned into Simon Says Seminars.
Okay, great. Now you mentioned university. Just so our friends know, my Risa friend is a smart lady. She's a UCal Berkeley graduate. So go Bears and all that stuff. Go the Bears. All right. You are also a kidney patient, correct? Specifically, you're a Pkd patient, polycystic kidney disease?
This is correct. I consider myself a Pkd warrior. Surely didn't start out that way at all. It was an interesting journey.
Okay. When were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed in my early 20s, around 77. And it was an interesting journey in that discovery. I actually was experiencing some chronic bladder infections, and so I thought I should be talking to one of my doctors and say, "Hey, should we be looking into this?" And the only reason being that my father had recently passed away from some complications to polycystic kidney disease. So I thought, maybe I better get myself checked out since it is a genetic disease.
Okay. How are you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed with a CT scan, and they did use contrast at the time. Little did I know that that wasn't such a great thing for kidneys, but my function was very good at the time. So fortunately, it didn't harm me. But of course, when somebody mentions the word contrast, I run.
Right, right. I feel the same way. I
Yeah.
went through that myself. So tell us a little bit. You mentioned your dad. Tell us a little bit about your family's PKD history.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, my father lost the battle to PKD in his early 40s. It also put my brother on dialysis in his late 30s. I never met my grandmother. She died in her early 40s from an embolism. Nobody did an autopsy, so no one was really aware of could she possibly had that gene, but we suspect she did. And yeah, I just neither my brother or I knew that we had the gene. It was something that we just sort of stumbled into, and I was a little more proactive, and I said, "Hey, let's look into this before he did." So I got diagnosed way before him, yet he had problems way before me.
I understand that not only has he been on dialysis, but he's had 2 transplants. He actually has 4 kidneys in his body.
You're absolutely right, Jim. Can you imagine 4 kidneys, 2 of them being PKD oversized kidneys? For the audience that may not know that this disease causes the kidneys to develop these fluid filled cysts and they enlarge. They get quite large, let's put it that way. So you've got these 2 huge, like sizes of footballs when they should be the size of your fist. And then he had 1 transplant 12 years after that. He had his second transplant. First one was deceased donor, lasted about 12 years. And now he's doing fabulous with his second transplant, which was from a living kidney donor.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
Were you given any advice at that time from your physician?
You know, when I was diagnosed, really zero advice as to how to slow the progression of the disease. If anything, it might have been, keep your stress down. What's that? I really didn't know anything about blood pressure, medications, perhaps slowing the progression of disease. I ate fairly healthy, but yeah, I think when we roll the tape back to those years, we know so much more now. And then certain physicians and nephrologists are far more engaged with their patients than others. And
Yeah.
I was probably crying when I was diagnosed. So who knows what he said? Maybe there was more said that I couldn't retain.
Okay. So you were told, don't worry about it. You've got lots of time. Go home. That
Live
kind of thing, right?
Oh, yeah, go home, live your life. You probably won't feel anything for 20 years, and in fact, it's interesting, my father was told when he was in the Navy, he was diagnosed in his 20s, and he was told he had 20 years, but he was told, "In 20 years, you're going to die." Lovely. Yeah, it wasn't like, "We're gonna do something for you," so that's
Warm
how
and
much
fuzzy.
yeah, right, that's how much they knew then, and it's probably why my parents really never told me too much about PKD because, uh, a number of families will experience the, "Do we tell the kids? Is it better not to know? Do they live their life in fear?" If they don't know that much. Obviously, I think it's something important so, the kids can be proactive and engaged and learn. I mean, we have so many years to learn and empower our process, and that wasn't something I was doing until a certain stage.
Well, I went through that myself. I have a son, and I've talked to him about it many times. And I remember that he got tested, and he said he wanted to meet me in a restaurant. And I met him at the Outback, and I had my speech all prepared. Right, you know the speech, right, Risa? I know where, I've been through this. I know where to send you. I know what medication you should take. I know what doctors you should be seeing. I don't want you to worry. And he came bouncing in and told me that he came up negative. So
Oh, such a
yeah,
blessing.
that's exactly
Such
the
a
way I
blessing.
felt. Was very, very happy about that. They have talked to him about genetic testing, and my advice to him was take the genetic testing. And you should know these things before you have children, and that sort of thing. It should play a part in your decision. So for all you PKDers out there, words of wisdom from our friend Risa tonight. So um, I'm told that there was a shift in your attitude toward your care and treatment after you attended a PKD convention. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it would be my pleasure to talk about that because it was such a turning point for me. And it really, if we go back to that, it was 2008, summer of 2008, to that period of time where I was feeling really frustrated in that, I would see my nephrologist on a regular basis. I think in 2008, it might have been every 6 months or so. And I would just sit in the corner and wait for the doctor to come in and give me my labs. And he was usually rushed. And there were, patients in the waiting room, patients down the hall. And in that period of time, I was fairly emotional because I had been keeping my fingers crossed for years that I could stay stable, and I was starting to notice the dip. And I also started noticing some symptoms myself because in 2008, the work that I was doing after I'd left the Pride Institute and started Simon Says seminars, even with the Pride Institute, we were traveling the country, putting on seminars at national conventions. I was working inside dental offices as their practice management consultant. There was a lot of stress with all that travel. Of course, back then we didn't even have, security screened. It was more glamorous back then, I will tell you, because I used to feel like, oh, I travel the country now. If you couldn't pay me enough to go do some of the things I used to do. But it's just interesting when you go back to 2008, and I thought I've got to expand outside the sacred walls of these exam rooms. There's got to be more information out there. I'm not getting enough. Surely there must be something I could do. And as you know, Jim, as patients, the more productive we are, even if we even turn it toward advocacy, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit, but just when we're productive and doing something for ourselves and of course others, we can really shift our mindset to, hey, I can either beat this thing or I can fight for my best life. And we have that sense of hope. But when we're just sitting there nervous, waiting for our numbers to fall, it's all gloom and doom. We feel like ticking time bombs. So in 2008, I was fortunate. I got a memo that said the PKD Foundation was having a conference in Dallas. I was living in Phoenix at the time, and I thought, piece of cake, I'll jump on a plane and get to this conference. And I attended one session that changed my life. I was on the edge of my seat listening to a transplant surgeon talk about something called preemptive transplantation. I'm like, what the heck is that? My doctor never told me anything about that. What's that? So I'm like,
Yeah.
ready to fall out of my chair. And he's continuing to share how the best outcome for particularly PKD patients, but CKD patients, is to bypass dialysis, get a transplant before you require it. And of course, I had no idea how many people were waiting ahead of me when I did need it. So there was going to be a lot of work there. If I was going to try to get a preemptive, it really had to be another thing I hadn't really heard much about, living kidney donor. And I was like, how does that work? So before I attended that conference, Jim, I'm embarrassed to admit that I had signed up for PD dialysis, not really signed up officially, but in my brain, I went to one of those Kidney 101 classes within the office. I had just entered stage 4, and they were actually just a little concerned about having me get into that class right away. They wanted me to be a little sicker because I was doing really well at the time. I was like, really, you think you need this class? I said, yeah, I want to learn about my options. And when I heard about transplant, which was introduced very late in the game of that session, they had me in overwhelm about the different types of dialysis. But when they got to transplant, and they said, this is a big surgery. It's not a panacea. It's not going to cure you. It may not work, and you're going to have to be on these meds, and these meds may give you cancer, and you could die. So that's why I immediately went, well, heck, sounds like I'm going to do PD. And then I got to this conference, and it was life-changing. Life-changing. I was really deeply troubled, Jim, that my doctor had not shared this information with me. It would have been so appropriate and so timely. I almost felt a bit robbed of this opportunity, and I thought, wow, if I felt robbed, how many other people out there are sleepwalking their way to dialysis like I was doing had I not gone to that?
Right. Right. Tell us a little bit about what you discovered about your GFR.
Well, The GFR at the time when I had attended the conference, as I was just entered stage 4, so I was at 29. And when I went back to my nephrologist and said, okay, I keep trying to have this conversation about what can I do? How can I be more productive, proactive? When I came back from the conference, I was like, okay, I've got a new plan. Listen up. And I learned how to use my voice a little bit diplomatically, but I didn't want to step on any egos. I still needed the guy. So I basically said, my goodness gracious, I learned so much. I have a new goal. I just want to be very clear with you that my goal is to get a transplant before I need dialysis. And I'm hoping you're going to be on my team. And honestly, Jim, I recall him rolling his eyes and thinking, okay, we'll see how that works. He didn't say that, but that's how I was feeling. So I thought, okay, I'm a one-woman show here, but I know, as you know, and a lot of people listening, we are our own best advocates, and we are the ones that care most about ourselves. And there is no one that's going to care more about us than us. And if we're determined to live a better and longer life, it has to start with us. So I said, okay, you got a lot of work to do, Risa. I rolled up my sleeves and I started interviewing people, people we know now, Jim, that had been on this path before us, and said, how did you work this out? How did you do this? Because my goodness, there were so many gems in these stories that we could empower our path with. And that's why mentoring is so powerful now. But I asked my nephrologist to refer me to get an evaluation. And that's, again, it was kind of during that time he was rolling his eyes. He's too early. You're not sick enough yet. And I thought, sick enough yet? Hey, my goal is not to get that sick.
Right.
We probably aren't on the right page or the same page here. And as luck turned out, I've got a lot of really nice little breadcrumbs of luck that have come my way, whether it was from dental assisting into the dental school, into that wonderful career with the practice management company, into starting my own business, into getting outside that exam room and learning all these tools. And I was looking at a Pkd magazine and Progress magazine, and I caught an article by Dr. Terry Watnett, and she had stated specifically that it would be ideal for Pkd patients to get evaluated at GFR 25. Hallelujah. No one's ever said it. I'm not sure they'll say it again. I know I saw her at a conference. She goes, well, I'm not so sure I'd recommend people to go as early now, but it's okay. She did it for me and it worked. When I read that article, I scanned it. I emailed it to my nephrologist and I said, now do you believe me? Any chance we can get that referral in? And he said, oh, okay, I'll send it in. And a month later, I found out it had never been sent in. So you got to keep knocking. You got to be persistent. People are busy. We're not the only patient in their life. Don't take it personal, but advocate, bring your voice to the table. And, we've really got to keep our eye on what's going on and, kind of watch the watchers.
Good. I want to get into your transplant story, but before I do, diagnosed in your 20s, problems in your 40s, transplanted when you were 54. I want to ask you about your philosophy about finding a donor from your experience, because that has kind of colored your advocacy from that point, correct?
It sure has. Really, it's kind of hip bone connected to the knee bone. Everything's sort of connected here. And another as luck would have it, experience is tied into this. The whole idea, and for those listening to the program, when someone is in need of a transplant and in need of a living kidney donor to have that transplant, so they could end their wait. Maybe it won't be preemptive. Maybe they're already on dialysis, but they'd like to end their wait. The whole concept of imagining, the transplant center and other people say, oh, go home and talk to your friends and family. Seriously? I don't even want to ask to borrow $5, let alone ask somebody to give me one of their kidneys. So how do you go about doing that? It was so foreign. So the first thing I'll say is that even if you are, your GFR is above 60 and you're in the, normal, and maybe not normal for your age, but pretty normal. But you know that there is a strong possibility that that's going to change based on your diagnosis. Now is the time. It's never too late, but earlier the better. This isn't a ruby slipper type of thing. You know, we don't click our heels together, snap our fingers, and all of a sudden living kidney donors appear. I was talking to a transplant coordinator at one of the transplant centers a few years back, and she cracked me up because she said, you know, these patients come to us thinking we have kidneys in our refrigerator for them. And I thought, yeah, you know, I don't know if I really knew much different until I had gone to this class. How does it all work? So number one, you've got to start early. Number two, because it is so awkward to ask directly, that the best thing you could do, in addition to sharing your story, the only thing you're going to ask for is to ask for someone to share your story, to join your team, to be an advocate, to be a chief spokesperson. And they don't have to do it alone. You might have team members and you can delegate different things, and everybody has different contacts, whether they're going to use social media, friends, contacts. But it's so much easier, Jim, as you know, when someone says, my friend Risa, my friend Jim, here's the situation, rather than, hello world, I need a kidney, please. And you don't, the pleading part can really be off-putting. And it's also hard for us to ask, really hard for us to ask. Hard to
Right.
be asked. I think if the table was turned, I don't know how I would respond if someone asked me. Honestly, if I, you know, we know a lot now, so we would respond differently. But for someone who is new to this, when you're asked that big of an ask, it, you know, they get into it's. I think of it almost like on the computer when you're opening a file that's fussy and it just keeps spinning around and around. That's what's going on. And I know I was just on a mentoring call today, and my mentee said, I was telling a friend and you could hear a pin drop. She didn't say a word and she never called me back. I said, she's chewing on it. She doesn't know how to
Mhm.
respond. And most people, Jim, most people don't have either the emotional intelligence or just the communication skills to say, oh gosh, Risa, I'm so sorry to hear that. I wish I could help you. But they're afraid to say, I wish I could help you or I want to help you because they don't know what they're volunteering for.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why your process is a little different than the way that many of us have been taught. That's what makes the discussion about your process interesting. Um, in your case, please tell us how you found a donor. What was the process? You know, like you said, everybody thinks it's ruby red slippers and refrigerators, but there are always bumps in the road, and your process is an illustration of that. So can you describe that for us, please?
Well, I did get brave a little bit every day to at least when people were asking me how you doing, and I started scripting my story, and I didn't script it to be you know, you need to be authentic. Didn't want to be so scripted that it didn't seem real. It didn't come from the heart. I had to come from the heart, and I had to practice in the mirror. I had to practice with friends. I role played with some of the people that were saying, hey, I know I can't get you a kidney, but maybe I could help you in this process. So I did that so I could get the courage enough to at least respond to people when they said, how you doing, that I could share the story. As I shared that story, and I had a few other people that were sharing it in social media, usually Facebook, the platform of Facebook for starters. And I had about 24 people lean in my direction going, oh my gosh, I was really moved by your story. Um, how can I help? But most of them were, I'm going to keep you in my prayers. And that's very normal. And that's, hey, listen, everybody can keep us in their prayers when we're in need. That's fine. That's great. We're grateful for that. But of course we've got anxiety because we're going, you know, how does it get beyond that step? Well, fortunately, I'll tell you, for me, of those 24, it came down to 5 people and then an unexpected 6. So the first individual that, of course, I went to this conference, remember, in the summer of 2008, and it wasn't until March of 2009 that a clerk in a vitamin store offered to donate to me. I never met her. My mom was in the store, had developed a friendship sort of with this gal, and was just talking about how my brother just had a transplant and I'm going to need one. And she started getting teary eyed. And the woman immediately, knee jerk, just said, well, I'll give your daughter one of my kidneys. And while we hoped it would all work out, we were the same blood type. She was very healthy. She was disqualified for various medical reasons. And it was really more anatomical of that kind of sort where I was going to have a double nephrectomy and things had to fit. It was like a puzzle piece, had to fit in.
Connections didn't match.
Connections, probably, yes. And so that was number one. Number two was a dental colleague of mine that I really didn't know all that well, who didn't even tell me she was calling the transplant center, who called in and started testing. And come to find out, she circled back to me and said, I'm really upset with the transplant center. They're not calling me back. They're not and saying some things. And I was like, wow, really? First, I had no idea she was in there. Then there was another dental colleague, that was number three, who started testing. She was a very busy practice management consultant, and her business took her across country constantly. And so she started the testing, but she said, well, I could do these 12 tests over a period of 6 months. That was interesting, because it's like, okay, well, then she was holding the space so no one else could come through. Then the fourth one was someone who caught a TV interview on CBS, our local Channel 5. And I was being interviewed and it was an interview about the vitamin store clerk that got disqualified. And the story was, hey, this gal still needs a kidney. And so she was moved. Turns out, coincidentally, she was working at the dental school, not the one where I was teaching, but here in Arizona, where I was consulting and helped them set it up and design the treatment areas. And she was actually an employee there as admin staff. And we had no idea we had that kind of connection, but she went through all the testing. She was disqualified because they found kidney stones. And I said, well, I'll take the kidney with the stones. I was like, no, that's not going to happen, Risa. She got him on one. She's probably going to get him on the other. But she refused to accept their disqualification, went back to her doctor and said, I want to get retested again. Can you send me a note back so I can go back to the transplant center? And she, I don't think that she got very far past, because once they sort of disqualified. I think they had her do maybe a minor test and said, look, we'd love to be able to take you, but we can't. So the centers, as you know, Jim, they're so cautious.
Very particular. Absolutely.
They just don't want to put anybody in harm's way. And if there's any sense of doubt, the committee just gets together and says, oh, no, we better not. And then the last of the five was a detective who caught the same story on the news, but it was archived. So she was just late at night kind of surfing the web and looking at stories. And maybe she was researching somebody. She was, as a detective, I guess maybe she was trying to find some information out and came across my story. And she contacted me, and crazy as it sounds, she used to be in dentistry too. I don't know what it was. It's had an aura around me. If you've been in dentistry, come my way. But she was all in scheduled testing, and then she no-showed to testing, which I have to say, as disappointing as it was, the glass was clearly half full, not empty, because thank goodness she no-showed on testing and not day of surgery. And what happens, as you know, Jim, there are individuals, they don't know what they really volunteered for. They may have discovered a little bit more about it, but most likely what happens, the breaking point is typically where they go home and talk to their husband or wife or children or best friend, and they go, did you bump your head? What? Did you bump your head on the way home today? That doesn't sound normal. And they want to protect their loved ones. So of course they're going to say, I don't know if this is such a great idea. And so sure enough, her mother had been saying some things to her before she no-showed. And so I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. But because all of those donors were circling back to me with these very unusual comments, like, the transplant center never called me back, or they didn't get back to me on this, or when I called in, at first they said I wasn't even needed because somebody else was being tested. And there was a lot of confusion. So I, put the voice, take your voice to the table. And I very carefully communicated that I wanted to speak to somebody in charge of the donor department, someone higher up, because I'd already kind of talked to a few people on the front lines. I knew I was going nowhere. So I asked to be escalated, and it took a little while, but I did get an appointment. I got a meeting scheduled, and the day before the meeting, I got a message that said, I'm so sorry, so-and-so isn't going to meet with you. somebody else will. And I thought I had been downgraded. I said, okay, I'm back to somebody who's an assistant of an assistant of an assistant. But as luck would have it, it turns out I ended up getting the real person in charge, the person that was in charge of the department, that was the person that could make things happen, that needed input and needed to hear what was going wrong, and was so open-minded, Jim. I was so moved how open-minded this gal was. She sat down, she took copious notes, and talk about just a look of just amazement, like, seriously, somebody was told that, or someone didn't hear back. And she recognized, because she had been and has been always a real proponent of organ donation and living organ donation, and just the whole she'd been in transplant. She's an RN. She's not just an admin person. She had been an RN for a number of years, saw just unnecessary deaths because people don't understand donation, deceased donation. And the night she talks about, one night where 2 babies died, one needed an organ, the other one was being taken off of life support, talking to the family. And in their defense, they just don't get it, didn't know any better, didn't really explore how beautiful it would be to let life live on, to give new life to someone else. So she never really held anything against anyone, and we really can't. It's up to us, our public awareness of getting people to understand this. But she said, you know what, that day just changed her. And so we met a total of 3 times. She left that meeting saying, we will talk again. I will be sending you an email to follow up on this meeting. We met 2 more times after that, and they ended up being more of a friendship. The next time we met, we had dinner. The third time we met, we had lunch at my house, and all we did was talk about organ donation and transplants and advocacy, and we were like Christmas lights. We were so excited. And I thought, my God, I've got the person in charge of this. I thought I was meeting with Elvis, I was just like pinching myself. Couldn't believe I was establishing a friendship with this person. And on that third time we met, Jim, it was just amazing. She had said to me, how you doing? First she asked, how you doing with your donors? And I had explained that other people that had come forward and couldn't even get to scheduling testing because they couldn't qualify. And she took a long pause, and it was kind of like, pass the peas. And in the same statement of pass the peas, by the way, Risa, I've given this long thought, and I've always wanted to be a kidney donor, and I've decided to donate one of my kidneys to you.
All right.
There are no words. There are no words. I thought I had a friend in the diamond business. I didn't know that was going to be my diamond.
So this ideal donor number 6, what's her name?
Her name's Melissa Blevins Bean, and she told me that she wanted, this is why I'm so moved in so many ways, but she wanted to see what it would be like to be a patient in her department. She wanted to go through her department. She had made many changes after we spoke, and she wanted to be a patient to see if those changes reflected. And she wanted to also assess what else needs to happen here. It was an extraordinary movement. She also wanted to show her colleagues, and the world for that matter, that if she could do it, you could do it too. Is the word. She wanted to walk her talk. It wasn't all about, hey, I believe in this, I believe in this. She wanted to do it. She wanted to walk it. She wanted to talk it. And she wanted other people to sort of go, wow, look at what she has done. And maybe we could do that too.
Okay. I understand you had a preemptive transplant, a double nephrectomy on the same day at the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix on June the 8th, 2010. How long did this process take to find a donor?
It was about 2 years. So those 5 and then the unexpected 6, it took, starting with the convention when I started, okay, I got to get brave. I got to start telling people. I was in the closet. And for all those people that are under the couch, in the closet, hiding under a rock somewhere, this is important. This is your life. I didn't want someone not to hire me to come out and do a speaking engagement or consultation. I didn't want anybody to think, oh, Reese is sick. Guess what? I was only getting sicker. And I'm the one that made the decision to step off and say, you know what, I'm going to first I said, I'm not traveling east of the Mississippi. Then it was, not any more than these states. And then I kind of honed into just a couple Western states. And then it was just, I'm not traveling. And one of the reasons, Jim, is that, I had some blood pressure issues that snuck up on me. I was not taking any blood pressure medication. I really didn't have at that time a nephrologist that was inspiring me to do it. I was more hung up on I don't want to take something that might make me faint while I'm speaking. And guess what? I almost fainted a few times on the platform while speaking. I realized, okay, Risa, you better be careful what you don't ask for and what you're asking for, because you're going to get it anyway. So you might as well do something that can protect you. So it was that, and how we get some of that fuzzy thinking. I'd be speaking to a group and I'm trying to think of a simple word, and I'm like, okay, come on, brain. So those things started happening, and I said, all right, maybe I just need to. It was so easy and such a natural transition for me to say, Risa, you've got skills. You can leave dentistry and you can implant yourself or transplant yourself, so to speak, into the renal world. And you could help your fellow kidney patients while you're learning how to do this yourself. And that's exactly what I did. And it was truly one of the best decisions I ever made.
Okay. Now, you've talked to us about the process. You've talked to us about the transplant. You've mentioned this tangentially, but there's a shift that you talk about in your books and in your talks, that you morphed into somebody different from what you were originally. You use the words, through your personal experience, you uncovered blind spots that influenced your advocacy for kidney patients, the empowerment of the patient to be your own best advocate, to fight for their best life possible. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is your thinking on that?
Yeah. Let me do my best to answer your question. You tell me if I caught your question
Okay.
correctly. I think that some of my skills back in dentistry, because when I was going into those offices and consulting, I was spending a good amount of time observing, and a lot of the advice and the engagement, the learning, the team building that we were doing, I even videotaped, and I needed to play back so these people could see how patients were being treated and how team members were working together. And so here I am, a patient now, and if I finally started getting out of my own way, out of my own sadness, I learned how to get into the portal and get my labs before I saw my doctor. What a brilliant idea that was, and how I never knew I could do that before was really, if again, people listening, empower your process. You get your numbers, you do some, whether it's just sitting in the pocket of what does this mean now, and get your questions in order for your doctor, but don't just sit in the room going, oh please, oh please. You're prepared, you're just looking for some feedback. But I started observing things in these visits, and I said to myself, this is unconscionable. This isn't something that is this isn't right. That whether the doctor in their defense don't have the time, for example, to spend the time educating a patient and encouraging the patient, engaging the patient, inspiring patients to be proactive, to advocate as a self-advocate, because we're going to talk about two types of advocacy. That's just not right. They're robbing them of their best opportunity to live a better and longer life. So that observation part really sort of whacked me over the head and said, you have a duty to use what you're seeing and transform it, not to just talk about the problem, but to find a solution. And that got me talking to heads of renal group practices and even individuals at transplant centers, just little by little, of course, initially those that would listen to me and say, hey, have you ever considered like educating patients before the end of stage 4? Like, what a concept. And it was like, well, and anytime I talked about the whole premise of encouraging preemptive transplantation, Jim, I think you know that you can find it's statistically documented in a lot of articles and white papers that the preemptive transplant ratio is so underserved. There's less than 3% of those transplants that are performed before a patient needs dialysis. So what does that tell us? We're waiting way too long. So I was really driven by that, and that just really fired up my desire and my commitment to say, whatever I can do, I need to do, not just for myself. Because something, at first it's like, if this is all about me, I feel a little funny, especially about finding a donor. But when I finally got in my head that I could be helping all those beside me and behind me, I was good with that.
Okay.
That felt right.
Now, as I understand it, there's two kinds of advocacy that you do. You advocate with certain national recognized groups, and you also do some business related advocacy. Can you talk to us about the advocacy that you do now?
So really all of the advocacy that I'm doing, and I serve, and whether it's committee related and or we're getting together as whether it's AAKP ambassador, NKF in their CAC group where we're advocates, whether we've been on the Hill, Pkd Foundation, whether we're joining forces with other like-minded kidney organizations, and that focus is on getting those that can make decisions, our legislators, to understand the importance. For example, I know you and I are working on these same. Of course, you're in fast high gear compared to the work that I do, but I will say that, the one thing we've been working on for years and really started refiring it up last year is the immuno bill, that our transplant recipients should have drug coverage for their life and not just have this, well, I can be on dialysis and be covered for life, and it's costing the federal government, and it's also costing the quality of life of someone who could keep their transplant for life, not have to go back on dialysis because they couldn't afford their meds. So there's the immuno bill, there's living kidney donor protections, the whole idea of educating patients and getting them aware of not only just testing so they know what their health is as a potential kidney patient, but how to slow that progression. So that work, Jim, really is all through those large organizations. On our nonprofit side, we may be more involved with, for example, National Kidney Foundation of Arizona. We did a billboard campaign. They were kind enough to provide a grant that helped subsidize some of that. And the billboard campaign was all about, we had, including my own living kidney donor, we had living kidney donors locally engaged in advocacy to have their picture up there and this beautiful statement that said, hey, I'm a living kidney donor, donate a kidney, save a life. And then it referred them back to a landing page to educate them about the process and to contact a local transplant center and see how you can make a difference. Those are the kinds of things that we get involved in.
Okay. My notes tell me you're an NKF peer mentor.
I am.
You're an education coordinator for the Polycystic Kidney Disease Foundation for the Phoenix chapter. You're also
correct.
an ambassador for the AAKP. You do business-related advocacy. Your Transplant First Academy, that's a not-for-profit. Can you tell us a little bit about Transplant First Academy?
Sure. So I'll kind of connect a few dots here. In when I told you Teamwork Concepts eventually became Simon Says Seminars as a corporation, right about the time I moved to Arizona from California. I was in California with the Teamwork Concepts. And then as I shifted into the renal world, I started a DBA under Simon Says Seminars, and that was the proactive path. And then I felt it was important to have a nonprofit. And, I love to learn and grow and figure out new ways of getting messages out. So we set up the Transplant First Academy. And the Transplant First Academy is really dedicated more to advocacy and education. Anything that we can do to empower kidney patients. And of course, as the name suggests, transplant first. We're all about preemptive. it doesn't exclude anybody who's still looking to get a transplant, but it's really focused. That narrow focus is really into empowering people early on in their disease continuum. So whether we are providing resources, webinars, and or just as a nonprofit organization having a presence in either a coalition or another committee like CareDx and their Honor the Gift, for example. So we're partners with them. But when anybody, just like you, Jim, and I know you get 10 times more than I do, but we get an email and someone says, help us spread the word. You're like, I'm all in, and you're 10 steps ahead of me. So, this is our duty. I think we have a sense of duty and obligation and responsibility, because if we're not doing it, who is going to do it? It needs to be grassroots. And our stories are what bring it to life. If we're talking to legislators, we put a face to that need. It's not just numbers, and it's not just, you got to do this. It's like, look at, these are real people. These are real people that get impacted.
If people wanted to find out more about you, if people wanted to work with you, if people wanted to work with either your not-for-profit or for your corporation, they can go to reeseassignment.com. Is that correct? That's your website?
That's correct. And from reeseassignment.com, if you go to the tab that says websites and partners, you'll be able to get into the Proactive Path or Transplant First. We also have another website called Transplant Strong. And so, yeah, there's a lot of information off of the reeseassignment.com site.
Okay. My good friend Risa, she writes books. Not just a talker, but a writer, and a couple of titles. Shift Your Fate. Am I getting this in the picture? Okay. Shift Your Fate in Pursuit of a Better Life, and or In Pursuit of a Better Life, the ultimate guide for finding living kidney donors. So, a book review that was given to Risa about the In Pursuit book. This book is full of advice on how to increase need and awareness without ever having to ask anyone outright to donate a kidney. It also emphasizes the importance of a building of a team of advocates to spread the word. There are sample letters, conversation scripts, talking points, as well as links to a ton of helpful, valuable resources. It is a one-of-a-kind guidebook that should be an essential part of every doctor-patient information packet. So my friend Reese is very well reviewed. If we wanted to buy one of your books, Reese, where would we go to buy it? How would we find it?
Thank you, Jim. That's so kind of you. The books are on the reeseassignment.com, or they can find me on Amazon. They're sold on Amazon, and it could be, paperback or Kindle, and even Audible on the In Pursuit of a Better Life. But I'm proud of those books, because I just felt like, boy, I look back at myself when I used to crawl out of that nephrology office and weep my way to my car in the parking lot and just sit in front of that steering wheel and say, oh my gosh, I mean, I would be shaking. I was so scared. There wasn't a owner's manual, and I wasn't getting enough information. And how many people can go to a convention? I feel so blessed that I got the message that you need to get out there and learn more. I wanted it to be more accessible, and that Shift Your Fate book is really about shifting our fate, to give us hope, to empower us. Might sound a little trite when we say information is power, but believe me, it is so empowering. The more we learn, it was amazing. You would think the more we learn, the more afraid we'd be, because we would get afraid or scared by the content we'd learned. But for me, and I think for many others, it was empowering, because the fear of the unknown is what has us spinning. And we can start, really organizing to secure a better and longer life, instead of fretting and hiding and hoping. Whether it was, I had Pollyanna glasses on for quite some time. I went from denial to fear, back to denial, rinse, wash, repeat. But did I ever really do anything to help myself? I was kidding myself. So that Shift Your Fate was really about, let me just get all this information together. And of course, this whole concept that we started talking about earlier in the show about how do I go about finding a living kidney donor. So I really wanted to provide not just verbal skills and scripts and tips and ways that it's almost like I have been told by one individual that read it, and I thought it really sort of framed it well, even though you'd never think of yourself of going down a path of having a marketing plan. But she said, this is like the ultimate marketing plan for someone who needs a living kidney donor. Now, you're not selling, you're not marketing, you're not paying, but you need to strategically plan how this process is going to take place and who's going to contact who and who's going to follow up. And maybe it's just follow up to the transplant center, but follow up when someone says, I'm going to go call the center, because as you know, Jim, many people may know that are listening, the center's not going to call you to tell you about those potential donors. Oh, Betty just got in, we're testing her. This is all very, in terms of the department, not cross communicating. You need to get your potential donors to as soon as you get somebody interested and you give them your transplant center information, you want to ask them, would you do me a big favor? Would you stay in contact with me? Because the transplant center is not going to let me know what's going on. And it's okay if you change your mind. I would never hold it against you. It's so important and liberating for that person that's going in, because they may change their mind. Transplant center almost encourages them to change their mind if they have any doubt. So let's have that open conversation, because we have to keep track of what's going on. We don't want somebody that we think is in the system being tested when they're not. And I go through this process of some will, some won't. It's okay, next. But get me to the it's okay next so I can get to continuing. We never want to stop sharing our story. Even when you have somebody approved in the schedule, your transplant is scheduled, you really just, hey, do it for the guys behind you. You just don't want to stop. It's not a good idea.
Now, I want to let people know that you have a YouTube channel, Risa Simon, and a lot of your lectures and your seminars, your webinars are on that channel that they can watch. So if they're interested in seeing Risa in action, check out what's going on YouTube. Now, my friend is modest. I don't suffer from this problem, but my friend is modest. All right, and she's an award winner. And I want to read you a bit. In 2018, my friend Risa won the Celeste Castillo Lee Patient Engagement Award from the National Kidney Foundation out of New York, not the local guys, the national guys. Quote, Risa Simon's extraordinary efforts to involve kidney disease patients in their own care has helped countless people. Ms. Simon's quest to help kidney patients secure a better quality of life is an inspiration to all who've had the privilege and the pleasure of hearing her story. This award was established in honor of Celeste Castillo Lee. She's like the founder of the National Kidney Foundation, by the way, a longtime advocate for patient-centered care and empowerment. It is the highest honor given by the NKF to a distinguished kidney patient who exemplifies the foundation's mission and Lee's legacy of putting patients at the center of all aspects of healthcare through their involvement with the NKF and their community partners. That's my friend, Risa Simon. And this quote, by the way, comes from Dr. Michael Choi, CHOI. He's a past president of the National Kidney Foundation. So she's too modest to do it herself. So, your Uncle Jim's got to do this stuff.
Thank you. So kind.
And I saw that you also won the Samuel J. Orenstein Award from the AAKP, and you're the driving force and pioneer of Living Donor Day, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to say a little something about Living Kidney Donors Day?
Sure, but brief, because I have one more important question.
We can just turn the page. It was a proclamation, started in Arizona. I was proud to get the mayor to approve it. Then it got through the Senate. And now we have handfuls of states across the United States celebrating the honor of these true heroes.
Great. These are strange times. We have Cyrus the virus in our environment right now. So tell us a little bit about what you are doing to protect yourself from COVID-19.
Well, it's funny that for those of us that are immunosuppressed, post-transplant, it's not unusual, at least to see me with a mask on. So now all of a sudden the outside world looks like me. Let me paraphrase it. The responsible outside world looks like me. And you and I are, I see your posts. I mean, we are just, thank you. Not only do I have the mask, but we also have gotten ourselves some shields. I double mask and shield. But I don't go out much. I've been, basically hunkering down, and we are not going into grocery stores. We're either getting them delivered or we're pulling up and we're saying we're in number one, and the hatch comes up, the groceries go in, so we're not doing any of that. We surely are not going, if it's not essential, we're not going into the doctor's offices. We're doing video and audio visits on telehealth. And I've actually enjoyed that better than being in the office. I get, my skin starts itching waiting in the reception area. And when you make an appointment at 1, you're lucky if you're seen at 1:40. So let's, my time's valuable too, just as yours. And I feel
140
like
sounds fast to me.
yeah, right. And we've got eye to eye contact. We're like eye to eye, knee to knee. What a concept, instead of in a computer like this. So that's been pretty cool. It's amazing to me as far as having the ability to protect ourselves in ways. I always try to look for the silver lining. I believe that, of course, nobody would wish a pandemic on any of us, and it just feels like it's never ending. And of course, when we have people that aren't being responsible, it may be never ending. But there are some silver linings there. I think all businesses, whether you're eating in a restaurant, flying on a plane, going to the grocery, whatever it is, there are going to be new protocols. I don't think they're all going to end. I think some very responsible things will stay. I hope they will. Let's put it that way. So
Right.
I invite everybody. Don't worry. I got over the I look funny with a mask on years ago. I mean, I'm 10 years out. 10-year kidney anniversary. My kidney's name is Mac, for Melissa's amazing kidney, and she is amazing. And you know what? This whole mask thing and protecting ourselves, it's not just about getting in terms of COVID, it's more of my whole life, as you feel the same way, Jim. We have a responsibility to keep ourselves healthy. We got
Right.
this incredible gift.
Right. You have to
And
appreciate the gift, Risa. Absolutely. Well, my producer's telling me it's time to go. So I'm going to have to wrap things up, but I greatly appreciate you taking time to speak with us. What an interview tonight. What a great show. And Tom Otterman is coming up on the next show, and our friend from the AAKP, Ambassador Pael, is going to come and speak to us very soon. So more to come. So be sure you tune in to Kidney Stories too, and check out your Uncle Jim. Risa, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate everybody. Bye-bye.
thank you, Jim.
That's it. Steve, make your appointment.